Thank you all for coming. We know that during this special day of food and ag, there's plenty of different events. So thank you all for being here. We are very excited about this particular event because we will be talking about not only regenerative agriculture, but also how to incorporate traditional ancestral knowledge into the core businesses of the private sector and how private sector can be a critical player in moving and scaling regenerative agriculture to the scale that we need to prevent overcoming the 1.5 degrees. So just for you so we can recap a bit about the importance of regenerative agriculture and the ag sector as a whole, I just wanted to bring some statistics to remind the importance of this sector. So 22% of the anthropogenic emissions are related to the land use change, and even though this is a sector that has a very significant impact in generating emissions, it is also a key player in sequestering carbon and basically is one of the solutions that we need to reach the 1.5 degrees. In all the scenarios of emissions reductions, land use change and land use use plays a critical role in achieving that target. Just for you to know, in terms of practices, regenerative agriculture practices applied at scale could draw down more than 10% of all our emissions into the soil over the next 25 years. So this is a critical, pivotal sector, and we need to scale it fast for it to happen. So in the panel, we have experts that have been working on this for a really long time and that have been both pioneers in addressing a key challenge for us. So here on my right, on my left, Fernanda Faccini, Head of Climate Change and Circularity at Natura, and here along is Guadagni, CEO of the Good Food Institute from Brazil. So let us start with a panel. And first of all, I wanted to start with you, Fernanda, and ask you about if you can tell us a little bit about what Natura has been doing and how have you envisioned regenerative agriculture and the vision for your business model.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here today and the invitation for Natura. It's very important for us as a Brazilian Latin America company to be here and talking about these topics. Natura is a Brazilian cosmetic company that is operating basically in Latin America countries, but our products are very renewable, so we're using for more than 20 years ago, we decided to move our formulations and our design of our products to use renewable ingredients and to change our packaging for more circular options. So for us, and as Brazilians, the agriculture side of the discussions is very important, and we are looking for our inventory. We depend a lot of the land use and of biodiversity ingredients, so we'd like to talk a little bit about these opportunities. And when we decide to use more renewable ingredients, we decide to go to the Amazon rainforest, and we invested a lot of technologies to change our formulations from the regular chemicals to renewable ingredients from biodiversity. So we decide to invest in technology. It's a long journey, and we decide to have a strong relationships with local communities at the Amazon region. So this discussion for me, it's a pleasure because I think that we can scale up this kind of discussion. Brazil has a strong opportunities when we are talking about bioeconomy for pharmaceuticals, for food companies, and as a cosmetic, we are using a small volume of these potentials. So we'd like to talk more about that to scale these opportunities for everybody.
Thank you so much. Within IDB Invest, we have the Amazonia Forever initiative. That is a program where we are trying to foster and encourage the bioeconomy in the Amazon. So it's great to hear that we can partner with you and learn from all the experience that you had in working with local communities and developing all these bio ingredients, right? And rethinking of how we can develop products, moving away from traditional synthetics into products that are regenerative for the ecosystems. Gus, do you see potential of scaling regenerative agriculture? If you can tell us a bit about what the Good Food Institute is and how you combine this seeking of changing our diets and regenerative agriculture. How do you see these combined in the fight for climate? For climate?
Yes, thank you. I remove my headphones because I can't hear myself while I speak. So thank you all for being here today. Today it's our food day at COP, so it's an important moment for us to be discussing this topic. And my name is Gus. As mentioned, I work with alternative proteins. Alternative proteins are one of the solutions for food systems transition and for us to have a more sustainable way of producing the foods that we eat. And already answering your question and connecting the explanation about the sector, the idea of alternative proteins is try to understand which are the main pressures happening on the food systems. One example that I have for this, here we are at MDB, and one of the organizations is the World Bank. The World Bank published a report in 2024 that's called Recipe for a Livable Planet, where they are ranking the most impactful agri-food climate mitigation strategies. And they list that the most impactful thing that we can do in ag food is to stop deforestation. In the second place, they ranked alternative proteins as the second most important strategy that we have for ag food in the moment. And why is that? Because the main pressure that we have now in our ag food system is actually the expansion of the way we produce our food, and especially the way we produce the meat and animal-sourced foods that we eat. And we know I'm Brazilian, so in Brazil people love meat, love barbecue, and I'm one of those people that love to eat what's traditional from our country, but we need to find a way of producing these foods that we love with a different impact, with a smaller impact. There was a research also published this year from Map Biomes. It is an organization that is looking at satellites from the Amazon forest, and they listed that 90% over all deforestation on the Amazon now is being converted to pastures, is being converted to area that is producing livestock or the feed to food to this livestock also to eat. So the idea here is that a future where we can be more sustainable in our foods production has an important step that is protein diversification. People will keep eating meat, and that makes sense. It's part of our culture, it's part of our nutrition. But we love meat, and FAO said that we are going to have at least a 60% increase on the demand for these foods in the future. How we can produce more, considering that meat production and also the crops to feed these animals, they are already using over 80% of all agricultural land of the world. And they are producing less than 20% of the calories that we eat. So it's an inefficient producing. This means that we need new sources of protein in the market. We keep the traditional sources that we like, but growing the 60% demand, we need to bring new sources of food. This is a movement that's called protein diversification. And protein diversification will allow us to release land, will allow us to produce in a more efficient way, will allow us to do some of the movements that are directly connected with regenerative agriculture. We cannot regenerate a land if we are using it to produce monoculture of crops or if we are using it to produce livestock. In order to start regenerating, we need land. We need space that is being used for something else being converted by Regen Ag. So that's the idea. There was an important publication from Dr. Kramer, that is a Nobel laureate, also last year, and they said that these two solutions, they are actually walking in a parallel path. It is the same thing. We need to implement protein diversification, release the pressure over the areas that we are using to produce food, and then in these areas that were released, we can make Regen Ag to produce other sources of foods that will be produced in a more sustainable sustainable way. So that's the idea. Alternative proteins are new technologies that are coming to add in everything that we are already doing to deliver foods that are healthy, that are sustainable, and that have a positive impact on the farmers and then the local communities that are producing food. So I'll talk more about that. We even have some examples with Natura that we benchmark with, but that's the general idea of the sector.
Fabulous, Gus. I have a question though. What is regenerative agriculture? If you can give us what would be regenerative agriculture for both of you? And then I'll pass it on to IDB Invest.
Well, if I can start, then for us, it would be to preserve, to produce our foods, to produce things that are important for our biodiversity. And not only foods, of course, we have Natura here that is using cosmetics. And the way of producing this in a sustainable way that is not based on monoculture, that preserves biodiversity, that preserves the species that live in this local place, and also that takes care of the social aspects of it. So people that live in the areas that are producing, they need to have good livelihoods, they need to have the possibilities of making their profits out of this agriculture while we are producing in a very sustainable way. So that's not a formal definition, but that's how we are facing right now.
Yes, perfect. Natura is talking, yesterday we have a panel here talking about how to do a regenerative business, because for us, we are looking for opportunities to see, we think that sustainable is not enough. Now we need to regenerate, so we need to think in this way to regenerate everything more than agriculture side of the discussions, that it's very important for us too, but I think that we can talk about regenerate the relationships with ourselves, with people, with the nature. So when we were looking for opportunities to buy ingredients from regenerative agriculture, we are trying to regenerate the ecosystems and to help the families that are living in this area to have a better life. That's my definition for regenerative in a how can I say? In the business model, so in a different way. And as an example, we are working with Embrapa, that is an agriculture institute of research in Brazil, with an example trying to move our palm oil by areas that we are buying palm oil in Brazil, because we are connecting with a Brazilian supplier, but they are still working with monoculture. They are certified by RSPO because they are looking for the human rights in the things that they are working with. But we are looking for a more regenerative opportunity, so we are establishing an agroforest systems in partnership with a local community, trying to scale these, because for us, 20% of our formulas depends on the palm oil. We have a huge factory in the area, in Belém, that is producing our bar soaps, and we depend a lot of these ingredients, so we need to change our value chain. And if we will achieve this goal, we will reduce something like 25% of our emissions from our products. So it's a very important project. And besides that, the project could generate carbon removals, carbon credits, so it will be good for the families that have this land, so they will receive money to better establish their cash flow, to establish their agriculture side of business.
If I can add something just before we have a formal answer about this topic, I very much agree that regen is about giving back something that was there in the first place and now it's missing. So monoculture of soy being produced in places that were pasture, this is not regenerating. Regenerating must deliver biodiversity, regenerating must deliver social impact, and it's different from monoculture that is growing in places that were degraded.
Thank you both for a very thorough response. And what I'm hearing from this, and I'd like to highlight, is the importance of conserving the health of the soil. If we have healthy soil, we will have like healthy plants, crops, and ecosystems. It says, like according to Project Drawdown, who I expect you're aware of, regenerative practices can increase soil carbon up to 3 tons per hectare annually. So if we start doing regenerative practices like intercropping, cover crops, including trees in silvopasture systems with cattle ranching, those are all practices. Organic fertilizer use are all practices that would regenerate the soil. And this doesn't come without also something that I'd like to highlight is the capacity of regenerative agriculture to improve yields. It is not only about preserving biodiversity, which it does. We've seen places that have increased 30% their biodiversity with regenerative agriculture, but also can have a 10 or 20% increase in productivity, which is incredibly important for farmers and to generate the amount of food that we need for a growing population in the planet. So having said this, and also highlighting that it can hold up to 40% more water, which is a resilience measure in the face of drought and increasing temperatures, I would like to pass it on to my dear colleague, Nora Lambert. She's a senior officer of social and environmental governance. And I would like to ask you, Nora, if you could tell us, please, how IDB Invest is approaching regenerative agriculture in the face of climate.
Thank you, Camila. So as IDB Invest, we finance private sector projects all across Latin America and the Caribbean. And for us, regenerative agriculture is not a option, it is the option and the only option going forward because of that double whammy. So Camila, you said in the beginning, Latin America and the Caribbean has to become net positive. Food systems, I think we will hear it probably the whole day today, food systems have to be part of the solution. And otherwise we're just not going to get anywhere. And this is because they have to become net positive. We need to reverse deforestations. We need to get soils healthy again. All these good things. We need to save what is left of biodiversity and actually improve it again. But also, we need to face a very stark reality. Climate change is there, so we need to make our systems in such a way that they are resilient and more resilient to the impacts of climate change. Because before things are going to get better, I think unfortunately the reality is that in the next years things are going to get worse. But the great news is, that we are privileged to work with pioneers like Natura, for instance, in really reversing this trend. We are also working with a lot of other clients all across the continent. In terms of scaling up regenerative agriculture. And we're doing this with a two-pronged approach. So of course we're providing finance, because as Camila mentioned, the great thing about regenerative agriculture also is that it increases yields, it increases productivity. We need food security, that is vital. So we are providing financing, but we are marrying that with technical assistance and with advice to really help our clients on a one-to-one basis to improve wherever they are at. So we have clients that are, with our help, building up their environmental and social management systems. We have clients that are really already going further. We have clients that have created labs, for instance, where they are researching biological pest controls, where they are leveraging what is happening in terms of technology on genetically modifying certain organisms. We have clients that are having wonderful innovative practices. Two things I want to highlight. We are working with a sugar producer in Guatemala, for example, where we are helping them. They are actually leveraging genetic modification in microorganisms so that they can fix more nitrogen in the soil, so to make soils healthy again, really using technology. On the other hand, we are working with a producer in Mexico to use biochar, but not just normal biochar, but biochar actually enhanced with microorganism to really help with the regeneration and to really help with degraded soils. And on the other hand, finally on that resilience angle, We cannot at the moment work with every client in such a concerted fashion. We simply do not have the resources at the moment. We're working on it. But what we are doing with every client now is that we are helping them screen their projects for climate-related risks and how that translates into impacts for their specific agricultural productive system. So we have a tool which we call Agriadapt, which leverages latest climate projections, so CIMIP6 IPCC climate scenarios, but it's not only giving us information on what is the exposure in terms of days with extreme heat, days with flooding, higher risk of extreme precipitation, but we are linking that with FAO data on yields and also with data on pest pressure. So I think pest pressure is a great example where that double whammy really comes into play, right? Because what do people traditionally do to fight pests? They use pesticides, which are not great for soils, not great for biodiversity. But if you use regenerative approaches, really leveraging nature as the best technology, nature having it all figured out already, then we can both reduce the impact from climate change, so heightened pest pressure, but at the same time not make things worse for biodiversity or even help biodiversity and enhance mitigation.
Thank you, Nora. And I think what is really interesting here is that you mentioned the Agriadapt tool as a first screen that we do to all our agribusiness clients in order to identify where they are vulnerable to climate change. And we can also then identify adaptation measures that we can offer them in terms of piloting new technologies or giving them technical assistance for them to enhance their practices. And as you were talking, I remembered another case that we are piloting a technology using bees, like helping companies install, pollination systems, like enhancing the pollination through bees, which is, basic, but it's good that we are going back to basics. So Fernanda, I would like to ask you about the process that you've done in terms of learning, what has worked, what hasn't, what were the challenges that you encountered in working with local communities, in valuing their traditional knowledge, incorporating that traditional knowledge into your products and your business models, and regenerative practices in terms of how did you identify those practices that you wanted to promote, which ones worked, which ones didn't, and what were the mechanisms that worked for you in terms of generating those incentives? Because what we've seen in previous conversations is that we have the knowledge, we have the technologies, we have the vision, we know our target, but behavioral change is the most difficult thing. So I'm curious about everything that you have learned and maybe bring some of that knowledge.
Yes, I was thinking why a cosmetic company is going to work with this kind of relationship with local communities. But for us, it was something related to our values. Our founders are very well connected with the sustainable values since the beginning of our company. So when it started this conversation about climate change in Rio de Janeiro 30 years ago, they decided to move our formulas and to move our business for this kind of ingredients and how to do that. So we decided to invest in technologies, but we decided to go to the Amazon region to research, and we find a lot of people that has back to the basics, as you mentioned. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of ancestral knowledge. So we have a lot of conversations with so many different local communities, indigenous people, people from different states in the Amazon. And when we were looking, for example, for the Brazilian nut, the women that are collecting these nuts have their hands more soft. So we decided to launch a hand cream using this Brazilian nut. putting these on our creams to better improve, because it's not only using natural ingredients. We need to deliver a good experience for our customers. Because if we don't deliver a good product, the customers will give up. They won't be with us. And the customers that are looking for Natura in the whole countries that we are operating are looking for this sustainable experience. Their beliefs are strong, connected with our beliefs. So when we going back to your question, when we decide to work with these local communities, we need to find a way to establish a good collaborative way, because these people are not confident that what a big company from the south of my country are looking with me. They were thinking that we will, I don't know, explore them, something like that. So we need to establish a strong partnership to show them and to learn with them, to hear them especially, because I was thinking that we need to hear each other. As a Brazilian company, we are here to hear, not only to talk. We have good experience, it's good, but we need to hear each other to see the difference. We are here in a different country to see the difference and to find a way to collaborate and to establish a better way to work. And when we decide to go with this local committee, it was like that. We need to find NGOs at the region and to know more about their culture, because we are from the south and the culture is completely different. We need to guarantee, to incentivize them good practices, because they are not prepared with the level of quality that is necessary for us to be connected, to be in a good way to sell our products. So it was a lot of challenge and learnings and trade-offs, because the logistics in the region is very difficult. So we need to find money to help them to implement the collection of the products, because they don't have money enough. They don't have cash flow to establish the production the whole year, and they doesn't know anything about, for example, logistics, about quality and everything. So we need to exchange our knowledge. We learn from them about their traditional knowledge, the traditional way to preserve the forest, and how can we help them to create. I'd like to mention an example. Ukuuba is one of the fruits that we are buying from the Amazon region, and ukuuba is a tree that they are cutting to sell the wood. So we invested a lot of time researching how can we use this fruit to produce some ingredient for use to put in our cosmetics. So we find a butter that is very good for the skin, and we are buying these fruits. We are paying more for them than the price for the wood, and they are preserving the forest, the standing forest, because they need that money to eat. Talking about food, they need this money to eat. So they were selling wood, but we working together in a collaborative way. We find a better solution for all of us. So we decide. So we are investing our research, looking for this kind of opportunities, new fruits, new seeds, a lot of ingredients that could preserve it. And we have a year ago, I think, Wharton Institute research talking with map biomas that the deforestation in the areas that Natura is working with is something like 50% less than the deforestation in the whole region. So it was, I think it's a good partnership. There is a lot of trade-offs. There is a lot of challenge. But the secret, in my opinion, is to have a consistency and a collaborative way of working with them.
Thank you so much for that. And I think you you mentioned something that I think is very critical, which is like the cost of opportunity, right? For the incentive to be an actual incentive, it has to be comparable to what they're doing, right? So if the wood has a price and you're paying more than the wood, then that's an incentive in itself. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't be as attractive. So I think it brings to show like the value of like the research and investigating from a purpose-driven question, right? It's like, what are the products that are contributing to deforestation? What are the drivers of deforestation? Okay, it's like purchasing, like looking for wood for these different purposes. What kind of wood? Okay, is that tree, does that tree have another value that we can enhance through a payment for ecosystem services through a purchasing of a product?
Yes.
And I guess, yeah, please go ahead.
This is why I talked at the beginning about how can we increase and scale this, because if we have more solutions, more food companies, more CPG companies buying these kind of ingredients, pharmaceutical companies, what kind of companies could look for more opportunities to work with these kind of ingredients, looking for these opportunities to help them to scale? Because if we find a different solution, because climate change is not only about risk management, it's about opportunities. Can we look for this challenge as an opportunity? Okay, so how could we help them scale and prevent this kind of disaster that we are seeing in the future? Buying this kind of ingredients as an off-takers of these kind of ingredients in our agroforest system. We are looking for off-takers, for example, for cocoa and other different species that we are working with, because we will buy only the palm oil. So we are trying to establish a collaboration with different food companies to buy the other ingredients that they will produce in this area. So how the different companies for different sectors could work in a collaborative way to find these kind of solutions? This is my question for the audience.
Any answers? Gus, I wanted to ask you, based on this, we're talking about scalability, right? We're talking about how to bring regenerative agriculture or these business models to scale. And we've heard that there are like issues with logistics. I am wondering in terms of a future with diets that are more plant-based. Normally we associate alternative proteins with soybean, and soybean is one of the drivers of deforestation. So how do you see the future of alternative proteins? Is there a point where they meet, or what? Yeah, what vision do you have for this?
Yes, sure. That's a very interesting discussion that I'm loving to have. I feel alternative proteins as we have different layers of impact. So in the first layer is already huge. That's what the World Bank publishes, that's shifting from animal to alternative proteins, even in a small percentage of the market, can reduce, and according to the World Bank, up to 6.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. And just sometimes we use these numbers here in COP and we think that everyone knows what they mean, but just to be clear about the size of this would be equivalent to mitigating 7 times the impact of eliminating air travel worldwide. So this would be mitigating 7 times the impact of air travel. And this means because the soy that is being produced in monoculture today is not for people to eat or to make burgers, it's to feed animals, right? So most of if we shift part of the meat industry to a meat alternative, we will actually use much less soy. You eat much more soy by eating meat than by eating a product that's made of soy. Just for us to know about calorie conversion in cattle is 1%. It means that we give 99 calories to the animal and we will take 1 calorie out of as meat. But also in GFI Brazil, we are having this view that the alternative protein sector can be even more than that. We have new layers of impact that is possible to bring. And one of these new layers of impact is exactly how we are going to work with biodiversity. So if our products are so much more efficient, we don't need to made them using only products of the monoculture. We can make them with soy, but we can also make them with the Brazilian beans. We have projects in Brazil for that. And one of the projects that I want to tell about is exactly about the Brazilian biodiversity in the Amazon and Cerrado regions. We made this project, it started I think 4 years ago in GFI Brazil, and we were studying about on how we can actually connect to the agenda of biodiversity in Brazil and understanding how the alternative protein sector could play a role. So we studied who was doing a good work on that, and the name that we got, of course, was Natura. So we studied Natura and tried to understand how we could connect to this production chain, and we realized that most of the ingredients that they are using for cosmetics or in generally are being used for cosmetics can also be used from food, and not necessarily competing, with the same ingredients, but actually adding. So for example, so we created these grants, science grants. We fundraised with our donors and we created science grants to develop food ingredients to waste products of the established production chains of the Amazon region and the Cerrado region. One of the research that we did was exactly complementary to the example here about the Brazilian nut. So the Brazilian nut is a very valuable product. We have been used in cosmetics. We have just been used for direct food. You can buy a Brazilian nut in Whole Foods in the United States, right? But the Brazilian nut has other parts of it. The plant has other parts, and one of them is the lead. The lead of the Brazilian nut is rich in fiber, and it can be used as a fiber for food ingredients. Today, one of the things that people try to avoid when making the products healthier is exactly sources of fiber that are seen as less healthy, like methylcellulose. Some ingredients have these strange names that people don't like. We could actually use the Brazilian nut fiber coming from the lead, that is a product that are being wasted, to replace these bad additives from foods. Now it's something that is natural, full of bio components that are good for our health. So this is one of the studies that we are funding now in the Amazon region. We are working with 10 different plants and creating food ingredients. It comes from, for example, creating new color additives from the lead of the macaúba. We have working with the baru nuts in the Cerrado region, with babaçu also in Brazil, and developing these new ingredients. Of course, we are 30 years later than Natura. We are 30 years later than the cosmetic industry, so it's just starting. But the idea is that we can connect these production chains in ways that are not competitive. If I'm extracting the oil out of something to make a cosmetic product, the rest of this, what's left after I extracted the oil, is usually called the protein waste. So the protein waste could be used to make protein that we are going to eat, right? We don't need to feed it for animals or to just burn or create other sources of using this now. So what I believe is that the food industry, the cosmetics industries, and any other industry that can use the biodiversity, they should be working together, creating new sources of revenue for the communities, and especially keeping the forest standing, because this will create different sources of revenue. If they are selling to the cosmetic industry, they are making money, but if they are selling cosmetics and they are also producing fiber and they are also selling to the protein industry and they are also selling color additives, then you create a full range of a portfolio of products that they can take from the forest, and this will be much more profitable than selling the wood of the forest. So that's my vision, We have a huge impact just by replacing meat for soy products, and that's okay, but we can actually have a much bigger impact, new layers of impact, by bringing biodiversity, by bringing farmers, by bringing other products of our traditional communities in Brazil and in other places of the world, and producing alternative proteins from that.
Just one comment. This is the way that we used to say that more than cultivate, you need to industrialize in a good way. 10 years ago, Natura decided to go to the Amazon region to install a factory. And the idea was to be an industrial park, with a concept of industrial symbiosis. The idea is to do the things that Gus was mentioning, to what part of the plants can I use, what parts of the plants could other industry use, and we could reduce the amount of waste that we will generate, and we could generate more revenues for other kind of sectors and something like that. So it's a very nice explanation. I love it.
Perhaps to add on there, and you asked earlier, how do we make this collaboration perhaps also across value chains happen, right? I mean, in the end, I think it's really about leveraging and empowering local communities and not thinking only from the perspective of, okay, how do we make sure those communities don't get affected negatively, which is vital, of course. But on the other hand, how can we actually partner with them? How can we cooperate with them? And how can we share benefits with them in an equitable and in a just fashion, right? And because in the end, the funny thing is, I think that the solutions are all out there. I think we've all mentioned them multiple times. And then, of course, in reality, sometimes when you work on a project, things aren't that simple, and there are still barriers, right? Sometimes there are financial barriers, where innovative instruments, we are leveraging blended finance sometimes, concessional finance, where we really think there is a market failure that without concessional finance cannot be addressed, which is what we're doing together as well. But often also non-financial barriers, right? Sometimes people just don't know, or maybe people have just gotten used to their way of doing things, or don't think it's possible. So I think it's great to have this connection of, on the one hand, having a programmatic approach. I want to replug here our Amazonia Forever program, which I really think is a great opportunity to really combine and to convene multiple stakeholders that work at all these different parts of the value chain, that all are facing different problems. But on the other hand, I also think, while we sometimes think the problem is so big that we have to work on it at a programmatic level, we still have to go deep, because the context is so different for every company, for every value chain, and for every actor in the value chain. So to me, the answer here is really both and. And that goes for, yes, both and, biodiversity and resilience. Yes, mitigation and adaptation, social and environmental, upstream and downstream. It's everything.
Yeah.
And I think that from this symbiosis is exactly how we overcome some of the main problems that we have now, right? So if you think there are logistic problems, but logistic to sell one thing that they are doing from the forest, or logistic to sell 10 different products. So the more we can have industries looking at this as an interesting opportunity, the more we are going to overcome these difficulties and these problems.
Absolutely, and I think to all of your points, right? It's in a way mimicking nature. Nature is very complex, and it works in networks and in collaborations and in symbiosis, right? And so we've been having like a very individualistic perspective of extracting one single thing from one plant, for example, but they have multiple benefits, right? And multiple services that they provide, and networks, and everything is related, right? So yeah, I hear like circularity, circular economy, like reducing the waste, making the use of all the plant, not just like one part of it, and working with local communities and highlighting the traditional knowledge. And Nora, you brought up finance, which is a key part here, right? So we have mentioned, Fernanda, you mentioned the carbon markets, and that you have like an extra pricing that like you provide another revenue in terms of through the carbon markets to the local communities. We have talked about biodiversity a lot, and there's growing interest in biodiversity credits, and seeing if there's a possibility to pay for the conservation of biodiversity. So I'm just interested in hearing from your perspective, what do you think are the ways that we can put together, thinking about, you know, the complex system, how we have incentives that are as comprehensive as we need? Fernanda.
Yes, for me, it could be a solution, but depends on the way that these biodiversity and carbon credits could be implemented. In Brazil, we are advocating with the governors because we are now establishing our regulated carbon markets, and we have a lot of discussions related to the payment for social and environmental services. For example, if we are looking for local communities, how could we share benefits with them? Because the land is their land, and we are trying to implement some carbon credits in the region. And some companies are buying lands, buying areas to implement carbon credits, but I think that we could have a huge opportunity working with these families and with these cooperatives establishing their own carbon credits. In my opinion, there is no... When we are looking for the carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets in Brazil nowadays, there are so many companies looking for offsets, only for offsets, but they are not doing their lesson. They are not looking for opportunities to decarbonize. For example, looking for ingredients from regenerative agriculture could be a solution to decarbonizing our business. You don't need to buy offsets. So we can change their mindset. We can change this mindset for the private sector and trying to establish better solutions and work in a collaborative way again to find solutions together to implement these solutions that could help us to decarbonize our own process. And working together, we can find solutions that could be productive, because they are not, in my opinion, the world is not paying the amount of money that is necessary to work. They are not able to pay the amount of money that is necessary to take care of the environmental side of the problem. So I think that it could be good. I don't know much about the biodiversity credits. I think it's only in the beginning of the discussions, but combining carbon credits and biodiversity credits could be a good solution, but depends on the way that this project could be implemented, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Just to add there, I think in terms of the incentives and creating the right environment, you need a mix, right? I think we cannot work without having the right boundary conditions. We need governments. I mean, we need them to negotiate, and we need them and we need them to enact the right laws and then also enforce those laws so that we have those boundary conditions and so that we have a level playing field for actors, right? It cannot be that just those actors that are driven by purpose, like Natura, for instance, are the ones that implement it. We have to implement it across the board, whether you're a publicly listed company, a family-owned company, or a state-owned company. It shouldn't matter, right? So I think that's sort of the baseline. But then, of course, in terms of incentives to actually make it happen, I do think, and we as multilateral development banks have a key role here in terms of where market failures persist, to address them through blended finance, where we can really see that additionality. It's on a one-on-one basis, to provide technical assistance where actors are willing but perhaps not yet able to really go to that next step, and to also leverage the value chains. I mean, you talked about offsets, right? Offsets are tricky. The carbon markets are tricky, but they will be part of a solution. And I think developments there of more companies, for instance, looking at insetting inside their value chain rather than offsetting, engaging more with the partners and with their collaborators. I think these are like moves in the right direction.
Yes, I agree.
I agree too, and I think like the most important thing that we have to discuss is funding and its finance. That's why, of course, this is the COP of finance. And I think like carbon credits, it's a very important discussion, but also it's a discussion for the future. And we already have many finance and funding tools that are not being used in the direction of this sort of technology and this sort of support. So I would prioritize this part of the discussion. When GFI started to make the first grants for the Amazon community to develop food ingredients, some of the researchers that work in the universities around there, they had decades of research around biodiversity, and they had never seen a grant for research around food and to develop this sort of ingredients for food industry. When we think about philanthropy, when we think about government support, even the development bank support, it is much easier to make projects that are more simple. If I want to install a solar panel in a community and there they are going to sell artisanal products that are very low in value, it's very easy. You know, we can find philanthropy grants for that. We can find funding streamlines for that. But if we want to invest in research in the universities, develop ingredients that will create permanent knowledge for these communities and make them permanently having more revenue because of this research, is almost impossible. We have almost no money in philanthropy now being directed for science in Brazil. We have almost no money in philanthropy being directly for the Amazon region to make relevant studies for their own livelihoods and for their own environment. So I would also point out that we need to have a quicker shift. Before discussing carbon credits, we need to have an immediate shift on philanthropy goals, on government goals, on the development banking goals, so we can fund more research, so we can actually enable the new technologies that will allow us to solve these problems. And thinking about those regions not only as the social movements that we are going to support as a more assistentialist way, but thinking about those regions as a very important science hub that is there to receive investment, that has many scientists that are ready for that, and they can create their own solutions on how to solve the issues that we have in our minds. So I think that's a very relevant discussion for us right now.
Biochar is a good example of this, because biochar is an opportunity to improve the way that you are cultivating to be more regenerative, and is a possibility to generate carbon credits. So it's a combination. I think it's all about E. It's not about or, it's about E and add all the things together. And so I look for example, these kind of biochar projects as a good example of this kind of opportunities, that there is a combination of the different benefits and good impact.
Absolutely, and for those that don't know what biochar is, it's a vegetable carbon, carbon vegetal, right? So it's produced through pyrolysis. When you take waste, organic waste, and you put it through the pyrolysis system, you end up having like a piece of carbon, right? And this carbon can be put into the soil, and it can sequester the carbon for hundreds of years, and it's porous, right? It has little holes, so like when you inoculate it with microorganisms that are in the form of a liquid, then it can be used as a fertilizer, and it's a soil enhancer, right? It like produces structure for the soil, and it enhances its soil health. So it has multiple benefits, and we are seeing lots of interest from. We have at least 3 clients that want to work with biochar. So, and there's also several methodologies for carbon sequestration calculation, so that you can emit carbon credits. So we are also helping them with that. I would like to know if there's any questions from the audience. We can have like maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll ask for last comments from our panelists. Okay. Yes? So closing off this fabulous panel with lots of, for me, inspirational data points about like, we are doing it, we have to do more of it, there is a potential to scale. We need financiers to come in, and we hope to be a key partner in that in the region. So looking forward to financing more projects that are regenerative. At IDB Invest, we have doubled our goal in climate and green finance. So we used to have a 30% goal of our funds going towards climate. Now it's going to be 60% by 2028. of climate and green. That includes biodiversity and circular economy and pollution prevention, right? So we're looking forward to changing our business model, right? Because going from 30 to 60 basically changes the way that we think about transactions. We have to go and seek transactions that have this impact. It's no longer like a good to have, right? So if you would have to say something in terms of how you would like the next COP to be, which will be in Brazil, what are you looking forward to bringing to the table for next year? What partnerships or collaboration or work do you think you'll be doing from here to Berlin? And if you need if you would like any support.
For me, it's an opportunity for everybody to the world to see the local communities, how they are doing their jobs. It's an opportunity to see the forest because we are having COPs in different countries. We have an opportunity to see the desert when we were in Egypt. And we are here looking for the oils companies. And we have a good opportunity to see how can we go forward with this kind of regenerative business model. And we can hear a lot about and learn a lot about how to do good business with local communities. This is the invitation from my side. I think we can have some visits to see our industrial park. I opened the invitation for you to see our Symbiosis Industrial Park, to see local communities, to see good experience that they are working with. We have more than 44 ingredients. So we can see and think about opportunities, how can we combine and collaborate to find a way to scale this business.
We would very much like to connect our project with the Symbiosis factory that you have there. And for me, I think that going to Brazil, we need to try to think on what are the problems making pressure over Brazil. Of course, fossil fuels is a huge discussion, but there is already information and data that we will not be able to accomplish the Paris Agreement goals if we do not make a transition on food systems as well. We can even make a strong transition in fossil fuels, and if we do not touch food systems, we are not going to accomplish the Paris Agreement goals. And being there, being in Brazil, being in the forest, you will see that the deforestation, that the forest degradation has cattle over it right now. And it's important for us to discuss in a perspective that is not ignoring, of course, the main impact that this has in our lives, of course, because we want to eat the products that the food systems are producing. Food systems cannot be understood just as impact. It's the impact of producing our food, right? So we need to try to understand on how we can make our food in a smarter way, how we can create a system that is more diverse, more resilient. And I expect that in Brazil we can put food in the center of the table of the discussions, not only in the table that we're going to eat after the discussions, you know? Our negotiations, our discussions, they need to be around food. Food systems now represent over 30% of the global GHG emissions, and they receive less than 3% of all investments on climate. There is a new report that was launched yesterday, so I'm yet to read, but they are saying that actually in the last year, the investments in food systems decreased to up to 2.5%, and only 1.5% of the total investment in food system is actually directly to sustainable food system rather than regenerating the greater pasture to make monoculture or something like this. So we need to increase very much the amount of investment that is coming from food. We need climate to understand there is no way we were going to meet our climate goals without working on the food systems and without creating food systems that are more resilient for the future for everyone.
Fabulous, thank you.
Perhaps, I think on the macro side, I have nothing to add. That's perfect. Perhaps I would like to use the opportunity to challenge everyone here in the room and outside of it to use the next year to rediscover and reconnect, because it's all out there. I think in Brazil makes that so clear. Latin America, you know, I'm an outsider. I'm German. Makes that so clear to me. Working with the region, it's all there already. We just need to reconnected, and we all must reconnect with nature. We must reconnect with our food, and I think then everything will flow from there.
Thank you so much, Nora. When talking about reconnection, you made me think about, I'm reading this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't read it, it's absolutely beautiful. And in one part, they talk about how in traditional practices, they use the roots of certain trees to weave baskets and to produce shelter. And so they have to dig the root, right? And in digging the root, they're in connection with all this network of roots that is basically the map of our life of connections, and they have to connect with the earth, that humus, that black, deep earth that has that very particular smell, and that smell of that earth liberates oxytocin in our bodies, and that hormone is the hormone that connects mother and child and that connects humans with nature, right? So it's generating this bond with Mother Nature, and I think that, to your point, that's exactly what we need to work as one. Thank you all so much for staying here and for listening to us, and thank you so much for both all of you three great panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you.